Solve this!
The professor slammed the chalk on his desk. 312 students went silent.
$10,000 if you can, girl, or shut up and leave my classroom.
In the back row, a young black woman stood up slowly, hoodie still on, notebook in her hand. Her name was Brianna Fletcher.
Sit down, sweetheart.
He laughed.
Math like this isn't for people who clean toilets at night.
The room laughed with him. She didn't sit.
60 seconds, Professor.
For what?
To prove I can solve it.
Waved his fingers at her like she was a stray dog.
Come on down, then. Embarrass yourself faster.
She walked down the 26 steps. The room held its breath. Nobody knew her father had been waiting 19 years for this exact moment. To understand what happened in the next 60 seconds, you have to understand the room. Wellington University, Boston, founded in 1832. Marble columns at the front gate, old money on the board, a math department ranked in the top 10 in the country, and a budget that could buy a small town. Inside that department, one man ran everything. His name was Edmund Ashcroft, two-time Whitman Medal winner, author of a textbook used in 84 universities. He brought in $4.2 million in grants every year, so the board protected him. Students feared him. He ran the brutal sophomore course called Mathematical Reasoning 301, and he was famous for one thing. He failed 40% of every class. He called it the Ashcroft filter. He said it was to weed out the soft minds. But there was something else he was famous for. In the math world, he was the world's leading expert on a problem called the Beaumont conjecture. 19 years he'd worked on it, 3 partial results published, a reputation built on it. If you wanted to know where the field stood on Beaumont, you read Ashcroft. There was no second opinion. Now look at the girl walking down those 26 steps toward him. Brianna Fletcher, 21 years old, from Macon, Georgia, full scholarship. Her mother Carla worked double shifts as a hospice nurse and slept 4 hours a night. Her father, Theodore Fletcher, had taught math at a public high school for 22 years. He died when Brianna was 11. He left behind 3 cardboard boxes of notebooks under the bed. One of them was a green composition book. She carried it everywhere. To pay for the rest of her life at Wellington, she worked the night shift at the Saunders Library circulation desk, 6 in the evening until 11. Some nights, during exam season, she stayed until 2 in the morning, alone in the building. She scanned returns. She helped students find sources. She had a key to the rare books archive because the staff trusted her. She wore a navy polo shirt with a name tag that read B. Fletcher, student staff. She was not a janitor. She had never mopped a floor in that building, but that didn't matter. Ashcroft had decided what she was the first day of class. He called her scholarship case in front of the room. When she answered a question correctly, he said, "Lucky guess." When she raised her hand, he called on someone else. Once, when she came to office hours with a careful question about a proof, he looked past her and said to his teaching assistant, Nathaniel Sterling, "Tell her I'm busy." She was standing right there. She heard him. Nobody in the class said anything. In rooms like that, silence isn't peace. Silence is a tax everybody else agrees to make her pay. And that was the air she breathed Monday through Friday for 2 years, while she kept the highest grades in the program and slept 5 hours a night. Now, 3 things you need to know before the clock starts. First, 2 days from now, on Saturday afternoon, Wellington was hosting an event called the Whitman Invitational. 6 of the country's top mathematicians on a stage, 600 seats, a live audience, and a campus broadcast. Ashcroft was the headline panelist. He had been rehearsing a showcase problem for weeks. The problem came from page 213 of his own textbook, the same problem he was about to write on the board. Second, the Whitman Invitational rules said a student could challenge a panelist publicly in writing with witnesses. Almost nobody ever did. The penalty for losing was steep. The reward for winning was higher than money. It was your name on the record against his. Third, in the green notebook tucked under Brianna's arm as she walked down those stairs, there were pages her father had written in 2008, pages about a single problem he'd worked on alone at the kitchen table, for 8 years before he died. A problem he never finished. A problem nobody in the math world had ever read. The Beaumont conjecture. So when Ashcroft drew that elegant little 4-line problem on the board and grinned at the back row, he thought he was the only person in the building who understood what was on the chalkboard. He was wrong. Why was he so sure he'd never met anyone who could see through him? Let's rewind to 90 seconds earlier, before Brianna stood up, before the chalk hit the desk. Ashcroft had been pacing the front of the room, smiling at his own joke. He wrote 4 short lines on the chalkboard, clean handwriting, confident. He stepped back so the class could see. "Folks," he said, "before we move on, let me have a little fun." A few students laughed. They knew what that word meant in his class. Fun meant somebody was about to get hurt. 3 minutes. Anyone in this room produces a valid solution to this problem, and I'll personally hand them $10,000, cash, from my own pocket. Tomorrow afternoon. The laughter stopped. The problem on the board was from his textbook, page 213. It had been printed in 84 universities for 19 years. Every graduate student who had ever tried it had walked away with nothing. The only published solution was Ashcroft's own, hidden in the back of the book. He waited, crossed his arms, looked around the room. Nobody moved. He smiled wider. His eyes drifted up the rows, past the front, past the middle, all the way to the back. They landed on the hoodie. "Miss Fletcher?" The class turned in their seats. "The young lady in the hoodie, you've been awfully quiet all semester." He paused. Let the silence work. "Would you like to try? I'll even waive the 3 minutes. Take 10. Take all night. Show this room what scholarships are buying these days." A scattered laugh. Sterling, his teaching assistant, didn't even hide his grin. Brianna didn't move. She was looking at the chalkboard, camera close on her face. No panic, just something quiet behind her eyes. She had read that problem the first week of class. She had read it the second week. She had read it again last Tuesday at the circulation desk, between scanning returns. And something on that page had sat wrong with her every single time. Like a picture hanging half an inch off level. You can't always say why, but your eye keeps going back. She picked up the green notebook. "Mr. Sterling," Ashcroft said, holding out his hand without looking. "The chalk." Sterling stood up and walked it over. "Miss Fletcher," Ashcroft called out again. "We're waiting." She stood up. The room went still. She walked down the steps, 26 of them. Slow, each footstep echoed off the wooden seats. Halfway down, a student whispered something. Nobody heard what. Caroline Bishop, 3 rows back, quietly pulled out her phone and started recording. Brianna reached the bottom, set the green notebook on the front desk, turned to face Ashcroft. He held out the chalk. She didn't take it. "I don't need 10 minutes, Professor. I don't need 3. I need 60 seconds. He raised an eyebrow. "To prove I can solve it, and to show you something you missed." The grin on his face shifted, just slightly. 60 seconds, Ms. Fletcher. The clock is running." He turned to the room. "And let's add a small condition. If she fails, she withdraws from this class today. She doesn't come back. We agreed?" He looked at her. "Agreed?" She nodded once. "Agreed." He pulled out his watch, pressed a button on the side, a small beep. "Begin." She didn't pick up the chalk. She picked up his textbook from the lectern, opened it to page 213, held it up so the room could see. And what she did with the next 60 seconds is the part nobody in that building has stopped talking about. What had she been carrying in that green notebook all semester? She didn't walk to the chalkboard. She didn't pick up the chalk. She stayed right where she was, next to the front desk, holding the open textbook in both hands. Then she turned to face the room. Not Ashcroft, the room. And she started talking the way her father used to talk at the kitchen table. "Everybody flip to page 213, right now. Read the first line of the problem out loud, in your head, slowly." A few students opened their books. Then more. Then almost everyone. Pages rustling. Ashcroft's smile flickered. "Now read the second line." She gave them 5 seconds. "Tell me where in that problem you see the words 'well ordered.'" Anybody, raise a hand. Nobody raised a hand. That's right, it's not there. She closed the book on her own finger so she could find the page again. Move 1. Professor Ashcroft's published solution depends on that set being well ordered. He uses it in line 3 of his proof in the back of the book. But the problem statement on page 213 never tells you it is. It tells you the set is countable. It tells you it has a certain bound. It does not tell you it's well ordered. That assumption is doing all the work, and it's hiding. 18 seconds gone. The room was quiet. In the front row, a student with the buzz cut started flipping back and forth between page 213 and the appendix. His eyes widened. She kept going. Move 2. Let me describe a set that satisfies every condition the problem actually states, but breaks the conclusion. You don't need a doctorate to check this. Take the rational numbers between 0 and 1. Order them the way they naturally appear. They're countable. They satisfy the bound. Every finite subcollection behaves exactly as the problem asks. She paused. And the conclusion fails. You can check it on a napkin. Try it. Across the room, 3 students were scribbling. The buzz-cut kid whispered something to the girl next to him. The girl mouthed back, "Oh my God." 36 seconds. Move 3. If you add the missing assumption, if you write well-ordered into the statement, then Professor Ashcroft's solution becomes correct. But it also becomes trivial. It collapses to one line. So we have 2 possibilities. Either the problem is missing a premise and his published proof is incomplete, or the problem is exactly as written and his proof is wrong, because the rationals between 0 and 1 are a counterexample sitting in plain sight. She paused for 1 full second. Both options are bad. 52 seconds. She opened the textbook again, held it up, read the problem out loud, word for word, slowly, so every person in the room could hear what was actually printed on the page. Not what they thought was printed, what was printed. She closed the book. 60 seconds. The watch beeped. She turned to Ashcroft. "Professor, with respect, you can't bet $10,000 on a problem that doesn't have an answer until you fix the question." Then more quietly, looking right at him. "It's a beautiful problem, sir. It's just the wrong one. I think you meant to write it with the well-ordered condition. It's the kind of thing you'd miss if nobody around you ever pushed back." Nobody breathed. Ashcroft's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. No sound came out. His eyes moved from her face, to the board, to the textbook in her hand, to the door at the back of the room, then back to her. He didn't say a word. In the front row, the buzz-cut kid put down his pen and whispered, "Holy hell, it works." Sterling, the teaching assistant, was staring at page 213 of his own copy. He had been Ashcroft's TA for 3 years. He had taught this problem to 2 cohorts of undergrads. His face had gone pale. Caroline Bishop, 3 rows back, was still recording. Her hands were shaking so hard the phone was vibrating against her notebook. Brianna set the textbook down on the front desk, picked up the green notebook, held it against her chest, waited. Ashcroft cleared his throat. Once. Twice. He tried to smile. It didn't work. He said. "That's an interesting hypothesis, Ms. Fletcher." He turned to the room, tried to recover, but 60 seconds is a parlor trick. Anybody can poke a hole. What I want to see is a mathematician under real pressure, real stakes, real audience. He turned back to her. "The Whitman Invitational is on Saturday. 6 problems, 3 hours, live audience, 600 people. If you really believe what you just said, show up. Same bet, but bigger. $50,000. Murmurs across the room. "And if you lose," he said, "you leave Wellington, quietly, Sunday morning, plus a $5,000 penalty for damages, paid over 5 years. He extended his hand. "Do we have a deal?" She looked at the hand, then at his eyes. She didn't shake it. "We have a deal, Professor." She picked up her notebook. Walked back to the front of the room and turned around once. "I'll be there Saturday. Don't be late." She climbed the 26 steps, opened the door at the back, closed it behind her. The latch clicked. The room exploded. What was Ashcroft about to do behind closed doors that night? By dinner time that Tuesday, Caroline Bishop's video had hit the campus subreddit. By midnight, 41,000 views. By 9 o'clock the next morning, the Wellington Daily had it on the front page above the fold. The headline read, $50,000 showdown at the Whitman Invitational. Scholarship sophomore calls out tenured legend. Ashcroft's office issued a one-line statement at 10 a.m. Looking forward to a productive academic discussion on Saturday. That was the public face. The private face was different. Tuesday night, in his office on the third floor of Harrington Hall, Ashcroft made 3 phone calls. The first was to the dean. He talked for 22 minutes. Nobody heard what he said. When he hung up, an email went out from the dean's office at 11:46 p.m. The Whitman Invitational format had been adjusted for clarity. The new rules said 6 problems total, 3 written by Professor Ashcroft, 3 written by Ms. Fletcher. Each contestant would solve the others, solo, on the chalkboard, live, 18 minutes per problem. 3 judges. 2 of those judges were Ashcroft's longtime co-authors. He didn't just stack the deck, he printed the cards. The second call was to a man named Walter. We don't get a last name. We just know Walter was the biggest individual donor to the math department, and he picked up on the first ring. Don't worry, Walter. By Sunday morning, nobody will remember the girl's name. I'll see to it personally. He hung up. He looked at the framed cover of his own textbook on the wall. Page 213. He pulled open the bottom drawer of his desk. He took out a single sheet of paper. He read it, folded it, put it back, locked the drawer. We'll come back to that drawer. The third call we don't know about. Meanwhile, the rest of the city woke up to the story. By Wednesday afternoon, 2 local TV stations had requested press credentials for Saturday. 2 alumni news teams flew in. A retired Whitman Medal judge from Princeton booked a last-minute flight to Boston. The Black Student Union showed up at Brianna's dorm room at 7 p.m. with a tray of homemade lasagna and a hand-lettered sign that read, "We got you." Brianna thanked them. She didn't eat. She put the lasagna in the dorm fridge for her roommate. Then she put on her navy polo, clipped her name tag to her chest, and walked to the library for her shift. That's the part the camera doesn't catch. While the city was buzzing about her, she was sitting behind the circulation desk at 1 in the morning, scanning a stack of returns, with the green notebook open next to her elbow. The lamp was on. The library was empty, except for 2 engineering students asleep at a table near the back. She turned to a page in her father's handwriting, pencil, dated July 14, 2008. The page said this: "Working on Beaumont, 3rd attempt. The standard approach is wrong. They're going through the front door of a house with no front door. Going to try the side." She read it twice. She closed the notebook. She put her hand flat on the cover and held it there for a long moment. She whispered, "I see you, Dad." Then she went back to scanning returns. Outside the library, on a different floor of a different building, Ashcroft was rehearsing the 3 problems he'd chosen for Saturday. He had written them himself. He had handpicked them from the deepest, narrowest corner of his career. The kind of problems only an expert in his exact subfield would even recognize. He smiled. He thought he was being unfair. He had no idea how unfair he was actually being. He had no idea who he was actually fighting. Because in Macon, Georgia, 15 years earlier, a public high school math teacher had been sitting at his kitchen table after grading papers, working through the same family of problems, alone, with a pencil and a green composition book, and 3 library copies of journals he had to renew every 2 weeks. That man's daughter was now 21 years old. She had read every page of that notebook, twice, and Saturday was 3 days away. Look, I keep thinking about that library scene. A young woman scanning books at 1 in the morning while a tenured millionaire is on the phone trying to bury her name with a major donor. That's not a fair fight. That's not even close. And she still went to her shift. Be honest with yourself. Would you have shown up? What was in that locked drawer in Ashcroft's office? 26 hours before the showdown, Brianna Fletcher walked out of her last shift at the Saunders Library and ran into someone she didn't expect. It was a Friday morning at 5:15 a.m. The sky over Boston was still dark. Standing in the lobby of the library, in a long gray coat, holding a paper cup of coffee, was a woman in her late 60s with a sharp silver bob and steady eyes. Dr. Eleanor Hardwell, chair of the math department. She was supposed to be on sabbatical for another 2 weeks. "You don't know me, Miss Fletcher," she said, "but I know your transcript, and I saw a video on a plane last night." Brianna stood very still. "I came back early. I am not going to coach you. That is not what you need. But I am going to do one thing." She took a sip of her coffee. "I am going to put myself on that judging panel tomorrow. The bylaws say the department chair is automatic. As of 7 a.m. this morning, that's me again." She turned to leave. Then she stopped and turned back. "Get some sleep." She walked out. That was the first small win. The first small loss came 2 hours later. Brianna woke up to a knock on her dorm door. It was a clerk from the registrar's office. He had a folder. Inside the folder was a formal misconduct complaint filed against her by 2 of Ashcroft's teaching assistants. One of them was Nathaniel Sterling. The complaint said she had recorded a lecture without consent and that this violated the student code. She hadn't recorded anything. Caroline had. It didn't matter. She spent 2 hours in the registrar's office. She missed a prep block she had scheduled with herself. She came out at noon, exhausted, with the complaint dismissed but a written note in her file that would sit there until she graduated. That was Friday morning. Friday afternoon, the second small win. Caroline Bishop showed up at the library where Brianna was getting 1 quiet hour of work in. She was carrying 3 thick books. She set them down on the circulation counter. "My dad used to be a logician at Yale. He still keeps an office. I asked him last night what someone would need to fight Ashcroft on the Beaumont conjecture. He gave me these. He said good luck." Brianna looked at the books, then at Caroline. "Why are you doing this?" Caroline took a second. "Because you stood up in a room where nobody else would. And I sat there and laughed in the first row last semester when he called you the scholarship case. I'm not proud of that. So at the very least, I can pull books off a shelf." She turned and walked out. Friday evening. The third small loss. The bank confirmed Ashcroft's $50,000 was real. The money was sitting in an escrow account at a notary office downtown. Brianna's matching obligation was real too. She had signed a paper without fully reading it. The paper said if she lost, she forfeited her scholarship and owed $5,000 in damages, paid over 5 years. She read the contract again at the library counter at 8 p.m. She did the math. 5,000 divided by 60 months, $83.33 a month. If she lost tomorrow, her mother would pay that. Her mother could not pay that. She put the contract down. Friday night, 11 p.m. The fourth small win. She practiced on a whiteboard in an empty classroom on the 4th floor of Harrington Hall. Caroline brought her coffee. Caroline tossed her 3 problems. Brianna solved the first 2 clean. She missed a step on the 3rd. She caught the miss. She fixed it. She solved it. Caroline didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she said, "Your father taught you this." Brianna said, "He taught me to be quiet. He said the problem will talk first if you let it." Saturday morning, 6 hours to the showdown. The auditorium across campus was being set up. 600 folding chairs, a press table with 7 cameras, a live stream rig, 2 judges' tables, 2 chalkboards on wheels rolled into position. Outside, students were already lining up at the doors. 4 a.m. they had started. They were holding coffee and homework. By 9 a.m., the line was 200 deep. Inside a small green room behind the auditorium stage, Ashcroft was sipping espresso. He had a single printed sheet of paper face down on the table. Whenever a TA walked in, he placed his hand over the paper. Sterling came in twice. Both times, Ashcroft's hand moved. Across town, on a Greyhound bus pulling into South Station, a woman in lavender hospice scrubs stepped down onto the curb. She was carrying a small overnight bag and a manila envelope. She had not told her daughter she was coming. Carla Fletcher had taken the night bus from Macon. She found a coffee shop. She sat by the window, She waited. Saturday morning, 10 a.m. The fifth and most important small win. Brianna and Dr. Hartwell met in the hallway outside the math lounge. They walked together for 1 minute. Hartwell did not look at her. He will pick Beaumont. It is his kingdom. He has been there for 20 years and nobody has beaten him at home. Do not fight him in his kingdom unless you have a map he does not. Brianna kept walking. I do. Hartwell stopped. She looked at Brianna for the first time. Then she smiled. It was the first real smile in the whole story. Then he has not learned anything, has he? She walked away. Saturday morning, 11 a.m., the last beat before everything changed. Brianna walked the corridor toward the stage doors. She could hear the audience through the wall, voices, camera shutters, scattered applause. She slipped her hand into the pocket of her hoodie. The green notebook was there. She opened it. She flipped to the very last page her father had written. The handwriting was in pencil, faded. He had written it 3 months before he died. It said, "The trick is, they always tell you the answer in the question. Read the question twice. Read it a third time. Then read it like they are lying to you." She closed the notebook. She slipped it back into her pocket. She also had something else in that pocket. Something she had carried for 5 years. Something she had never shown her mother. A folded letter. Dated 2009. She had read it for the first time when she was 16 years old, sitting alone on the floor of her father's closet, going through a cardboard box she wasn't supposed to find. She had never told anyone. She wasn't going to tell anyone today either. She pushed the auditorium door open with her shoulder, and on the other side of that door, 3,000 miles of family history were about to land in one room. What was in the letter she had hidden for 5 years? Dr. Hartwell stepped up to the microphone at 1:58 p.m. The auditorium went quiet. The format, she said, is 6 problems. 3 written by Professor Ashcroft, 3 written by Ms. Fletcher. Each contestant will solve the others. 18 minutes per problem. 3 judges. She paused. Dr. Harlan Whitmore on my left. Myself in the center. She gestured to the woman on her right. And our guest judge, Dr. Margaret Holloway, senior editor of the American Journal of Pure Mathematics. The audience murmured. Ashcroft's head turned slightly. The smile on his face didn't move, but his eyes did. He had not known Holloway would be on the panel. Neither had Brianna. The first half of the showdown went fast. Ashcroft was given Brianna's 3 problems. He solved them, cleanly, confidently. They were hard. He was harder. He sat down. The crowd applauded. He smiled. Then Brianna walked to the chalkboard. A page was handed to her by a proctor. She unfolded it. She read. She read it again. Her face changed. It was not panic. It was something colder, something quieter. It was the face of a person who has just recognized a relative they did not expect to see in a crowd. The problem on the page was the Beaumont conjecture. It was Ashcroft's kingdom. 19 years he had worked on it. 3 published partial results. A reputation built around it. Anyone who knew his name knew Beaumont. He had picked the deepest problem in his career and put it in the hand of a 21-year-old sophomore in a hoodie. It was the cruelest thing he could think of. He thought he was being unbeatable. He didn't know what he had just done. Because in a cramped 2-bedroom house in Macon, Georgia, from 2003 to 2011, a high school math teacher named Theodore Fletcher had sat at his kitchen table almost every night after grading papers and worked on the exact same problem. Alone. With pencils and a green notebook and 3 library copies of journals he had to renew every 2 weeks. He had approached it from a direction the mathematics community considered too simple to bother with. He had been wrong, the field said, before they ever read him. He had been right. He had gone further on Beaumont than Ashcroft. He had finished a draft in 2009. The 2 men had never met. They had never spoken. They had never been in the same room. Ashcroft did not know Theodore Fletcher's name. He had never heard it, but Theodore's daughter was standing at the chalkboard right now, and in her pocket was a green notebook with 8 years of work in it. The clock started. 18 minutes. She did not pick up the chalk. Why was she staring at her own hand instead of the board? She stood at the chalkboard for 2 full minutes. She did not write anything. The first murmur came at the 90-second mark. From the press row, a reporter whispered to the woman next to him, "She's frozen." The clock read 16 minutes, 28 seconds. In the front row, Carolyn Bishop lowered her phone. Her eyes were shining. She hadn't realized she was holding her breath. In the back row, Carla Fletcher, in her lavender scrubs, leaned forward in her seat just an inch, just enough to be ready to stand. She did not stand. On the judging panel, Dr. Hartwell's hand moved toward the microphone, then stopped. On the contestants' bench, Ashcroft exhaled, slow, satisfied. He started to gather his coat. Brianna set the chalk down on the tray. She stepped back from the board. The room read it as surrender. A voice rose in the back. A camera shutter clicked. Somebody muttered, "Oh no." Sterling, sitting 3 rows behind the judges, looked down at his hands and did not look up. She thought about her mother. She thought about the $5,000 she could not pay. She thought about her father, alone at the kitchen table for 8 years, scratching at the same problem with a pencil that needed sharpening, never finishing it. She thought about the letter in her pocket from 2009, the one she had read at 16 on the floor of his closet, the one she had never shown her mother. She thought about quitting. Then she heard a voice from the panel. "Ms. Fletcher." Dr. Hartwell. Calm. Microphone on. "You have 15 minutes, 42 seconds remaining. Take your time." She was not letting Ashcroft pack up. Brianna looked at her. Hartwell did not smile. She just held the look. Brianna walked, not off the stage, sideways, to the small contestants' table where her personal items sat. She picked up the green notebook. She opened it. She turned, slowly, until she was facing the audience instead of the chalkboard. 600 people looking back at her. She held the notebook up so they could see it. "Before I begin," she said, "I want the room to know something, because if I solve this, it shouldn't surprise anyone here. And if I don't, it shouldn't shame anyone either." She opened to a specific page. The page was dated July 14, 2008. The handwriting was a man's. The page was worn from being read. "This is the handwriting of Theodore Fletcher. He was my father. He was a high school math teacher in Macon, Georgia. He taught teenagers for 22 years in a building with a roof that leaked when it rained." The room was completely silent. He died in 2011. Before he died, he spent 8 years of his life, alone, working on this exact problem. The problem on the chalkboard behind me. The Beaumont conjecture. She closed the notebook. He never met Professor Ashcroft. He never met anyone in this room. Nobody ever published him. Nobody ever read him. He is not in any journal in this building. She paused. "With the panel's permission, I would like to finish what he started." The silence got deeper. Dr. Hartwell did not look at Ashcroft. She looked at Margaret Holloway. Holloway slowly opened the leather notebook on her side of the panel desk. She uncapped a pen. She wrote one word at the top of the page. Nobody could see what the word was. Then she looked up at Brianna and said clearly, "Granted." Whitmore nodded. Hartwell nodded. Ashcroft did not nod. His coat was on his lap. His hands had stopped moving. Brianna walked back to the chalkboard. 15 minutes, 10 seconds on the clock. She picked up the chalk. In the back of the auditorium, Carla Fletcher, who had sat through 8 years of her husband's silence and another 15 years of his absence, put both hands over her mouth and waited. What had Holloway written down at the top of her page? She wrote the problem on the chalkboard in her own notation. Slowly. Clean. She said, almost to herself, but loud enough that the first 3 rows could hear. "My father always told me, the first thing you do is restate the problem until the assumptions can't hide anymore." 3 minutes in, the room had not moved. She underlined a single phrase in the problem statement. The phrase was, "every finite subcollection." She circled it twice. "The standard approach to this conjecture," she said, "attacks it by induction on cardinality. It's elegant. It's also wrong. It assumes the structure behaves at infinity the way it behaves at every finite stage. It doesn't. And every published attempt for the last 40 years has hit that wall." 7 minutes in. My father did not have access to the latest journals in Macon, Georgia. He could not afford a subscription. He renewed 3 library copies every 2 weeks for 8 years. He didn't know what the field said was impossible, so he built his own door. She drew a small diagram on the right side of the board. 6 lines, 2 arrows, a circled point. He called it a switching argument. Instead of inducting on size, you induct on a constructed pivot. You swap 2 elements at each stage according to a rule. The rule is not in any textbook. He wrote it on page 40 of this notebook in February of 2006. She did not look at Ashcroft. She did not look at the audience. She was looking at the chalkboard. 10 minutes in, she walked through the argument in 4 stages. Each stage was visible. Each stage used tools any second-year math student could recognize. There was no fancy machinery. There was no name-dropping of obscure theorems. There was a constructed sequence. There was a pigeonhole step. There was the switching lemma. There was a final collapse where 2 infinite cases compressed into a single line. She did not rush. She let the chalk make the sound it made on the board. Tap, drag, tap. 15 minutes, 32 seconds. She set the chalk down. She stepped back. The proof was on the board. She picked the chalk back up. She wrote 1 line under the final equation. She wrote it slowly so the cameras could see it. After unpublished work of Theodore Fletcher, Macon, Georgia, 2003 to 2011. Completed by Brianna Fletcher, today. She set the chalk down. She did not look at Ashcroft. 16 minutes, 10 seconds remaining on the clock. She finished early by almost 2 minutes. The auditorium did not applaud. Not yet. The 3 judges were reading the board. Whitmore had taken off his glasses. He had set them on the table. He was leaning forward. He was not blinking. Holloway was writing rapidly in her leather notebook. She paused. She wrote again. She paused. She underlined something. Twice. Hartwell turned to her left, then to her right. She tapped her microphone once. She waited. Then she spoke. The proof is valid. The method is novel. A few breaths released across the auditorium. For the record, Ms. Fletcher has produced a solution path on the Beaumont conjecture that, to this panel's combined knowledge, spanning 4 decades in the field, has not appeared in published literature. Dr. Holloway, would you confirm? Holloway leaned into her microphone. Confirmed. The approach is new to me. The lemma in stage 2 is new to me. I would like to speak with Ms. Fletcher after this hearing about publication in our journal. Whitmore leaned in. His voice was quieter than usual. Confirmed. Hartwell looked once at Ashcroft. He had not moved. She turned back to the microphone. Per the bylaws of this invitational, and per the terms of the wager signed by both parties on Wednesday at 4:07 p.m., the panel rules in favor of Ms. Brianna Fletcher. That is when the room moved. The first clap came from the back row, from a woman in lavender scrubs who had taken a bus from Macon, Georgia, the night before. Carla Fletcher stood up. She put her hands together. 1 clap, then another. Then Caroline Bishop in the front row stood up. Then the entire Black Student Union row. Then the buzz-cut kid from the first lecture. Then a young woman with a press credential. Then everyone. 600 people, standing, applauding. It was not cheering. It was that long, steady applause that says something more than "good job." It went on for 40 seconds, then for a full minute. Brianna did not smile. She did not raise her hands. She did not look at the cameras. She picked up her green notebook from the contestants' table. She held it once against her chest. Then she walked down the steps of the stage, past the judges, past the press row, past Ashcroft, who was sitting completely still in his chair, all the way to the back of the auditorium. She handed the notebook to her mother. Carla took it with both hands. The 2 of them held it together between them, mother and daughter, in a room of 600 white faces, with 8 years of one black man's silence finally in someone else's hands. The cameras caught it. Then Hartwell turned to the contestants' bench. Professor Ashcroft, the rules require the losing contestant to address the room and publicly acknowledge the result. Would you like the microphone? It was not a question. Ashcroft stood. He walked to the microphone. He stopped. He looked down at the floor. He looked at his own textbook sitting on the panel desk. Page 213. He looked at Sterling, 3 rows back. Sterling was looking at his own hands. He did not look up. Ashcroft pulled the microphone closer to his mouth. He was breathing through his nose. The solution is valid. The method is one I have never seen. He paused. 5 seconds. 10. I concede the wager. To Ms. Fletcher. He started to step away from the microphone. Then he stopped. He came back. And to her father, whom evidently I had not read. He stepped down from the panel area. He did not walk back to his seat. He walked toward the side door of the auditorium. He pushed it open with his shoulder. He let it close behind him. He did not come back that day. Okay, I had to rewind that moment 3 times. A 2-time Whitman Medal winner just admitted in front of 600 people that he never read the work of a black high school teacher who'd been dead for 15 years. Not an apology, not an excuse, just the truth. That hit me somewhere I didn't expect. What did Carla Fletcher have in her bag that nobody knew about? The conference room on the 2nd floor of Harrington Hall, 8:42 p.m. that same Saturday. 3 people at the long table: Dr. Margaret Holloway, Brianna, Carla. Carla set her overnight bag on the floor. She unzipped the top pocket. She took out a yellowed manila envelope. She slid it across the table to Holloway. Brianna froze. Dr. Holloway, Carla said. Her voice was steady. In April of 2009, my husband mailed a manuscript to the American Journal of Pure Mathematics. This is the reply he received. Brianna could not breathe. She had hidden that letter inside her green notebook for 5 years. She had found it at 16 in a cardboard box in her father's closet. She had read it once, folded it back, and never told her mother. Not once. She had been carrying it to protect her mother from it. Her mother had a copy too. Her mother had known the whole time. Carla looked at her daughter across the table. She reached out and put her hand over Brianna's hand. She did not speak. She just held it there. Holloway opened the envelope. She read the letter. She did not say anything for a long minute. Then she set it down. 11 days from receipt to rejection. No peer review. The stated reason is that the author lacks a doctorate and is not affiliated with a research university. The signature is my predecessor's. She folded the letter once. I cannot reverse 2009, but I can make sure 2026 does not forget it. She made 3 commitments out loud. 1. The journal would re-review Theodore Fletcher's original 2009 manuscript with an independent international panel. If valid, it would be published posthumously in a special issue. 2. That special issue would carry an accompanying article on bias in editorial rejection. 3. The journal would establish the Theodore Fletcher Prize, an annual award for mathematicians working outside the university system. 48 hours later, the Boston Globe ran the story above the fold. The headline was, "Wellington Professor Suspended After Public Math Showdown. Forgotten Black Mathematician's Work Vindicated by His Daughter." The video crossed 2 million views in 7 days. What had Wellington's Board of Trustees been waiting to do for 19 years? 6 weeks later, on a Thursday afternoon in the spring, a poster went up on the bulletin board outside the math lounge at Wellington University. The poster read, "Guest Lecture, Brianna Fletcher, reading the question 3 times, a tribute to Theodore Fletcher." By 2 p.m., the lecture hall was standing room only. The same hall where it had started. Brianna stood at the lectern in a clean button-down shirt. The green notebook was open beside her. In the front row, Caroline Bishop was recording. This time, with permission and a small smile. In the second row, her mother sat in a soft yellow Sunday dress instead of scrubs. Brianna did not open with math. She opened with this. My father used to tell me, the smartest people in the room are not the ones who know the most. They are the ones who are not afraid to read the question one more time, especially when somebody important is hoping you won't. The room was quiet, but it was the warm kind of quiet, the kind that comes before applause, not before judgment. Here is the rest of it. Brianna Fletcher graduated from Wellington 2 years later, summa cum laude. She earned her doctorate at Princeton. Today she teaches at a public university in Atlanta, close to her mother, close to the city where her father once worked, at a kitchen table that no one ever asked to read. Professor Ashcroft took an early retirement. He did not return to the building. The textbook is still reprinted every year. Page 213 now carries a footnote. The footnote carries a name. The name is Theodore Fletcher. Sometimes the longest road to recognition is the one that runs backward, through the people who did not live to see it. I tell this story because somewhere right now, there is a young woman scanning library returns at 1 in the morning with her father's old notebook in her pocket. I want her to know, your name does not have to be on the building for it to belong in the book. Read the question one more time. If this story moved you, drop one word in the comments. The name of someone in your life who taught you something nobody ever gave them credit for. Share this with a young person who needs to hear it. And subscribe. There are more stories like Brianna's coming. We tell them here, quietly, one room at a time. Hey, never let anyone tell you where you belong. Talent isn't limited by background. It exists wherever people show up and work quietly, even when nobody is watching.